Hey guys, it's Megan. Welcome back to my home library. I don't have my chair that I usually sit at, so unfortunately you can see all the junk that I store on top of my shelves. Sorry about that. Anyway, today I'm going to do a tag that I meant to do a long time ago. Chloe Frizzle, I am so sorry you tagged me in this a long time ago and I kept meaning to do it. And then honestly, I didn't know about it at first because I never checked to see who's tagged me and stuff. But anyway, this is a book recommendation tag created by Steph from Steph Borer, or however you say her name. Anyway, I'm mostly going to be recommending fantasy, thrillers. That's pretty much it. And some of it's young adult, but some of it's also adult. So it's a good thing I'm standing because I can just pull the books off the shelves as I'm recommending them. These are almost all 5-star reads for me, maybe 4.5, but these are books I definitely recommend. You're gonna hear me talk about books I've talked about before because I love them so much. Oh, and also our drink of our video today is the Fantasy Vibe Celsius Sparkling Mandarin Marshmallow. I've had it before. It tastes like oranges and marshmallows. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's been a while since I had it. It's got a lot of caffeine, so I can't, drink very much of it. Oh, wow. Amazing. Love it. I thought it was more marshmallowy, but it's very orangey this time. Still really good. So let's get into this tag. The first question is a book that you tell people is your favorite. I only have one favorite series. I have a lot of books I absolutely love, and a lot of favorite series, but I actually don't have my copies on hand because they're upstairs, because they're in my son's bedroom, because his bedroom is themed to this series, and that is Harry Potter. I would not be where I am today. I would literally not be a librarian if it weren't for Harry Potter. I used to hate reading as a child until my mom made me read this, and I only had the first 3 books out, when I started reading them, when I was 11 or 12, and then I had to wait. So basically from the time I was 12 to 20, I think the last book came out when I was 20, I had to wait a long time for the series. So it was basically my entire teenage years that I was reading the series, and it's still my absolute favorite and nothing can ever beat it. And next, number 2 is a book that is your guilty pleasure. I don't know how to answer this question. I mean, Fourth Wing, I guess, could kind of be. I just really need to work Anne Rice in here though, so I'm gonna say anything by Anne Rice. I know it's not even, why is that even guilty? I don't know. But I'm gonna, oh man, that's my signed copy. No! Okay, well, we're gonna have to fix that. But Anne Rice books in general, I mean, I'm gonna say they're my guilty pleasure. They're kind of my go-to. They're kind of ridiculous, vampires, but her writing is very classics, if you like the way classics are worded. Their plots are kind of slow moving. The language is very dense. The descriptions are a lot, but they're absolutely phenomenal. And Anne Rice is my favorite author of all time. So I'm going to say those books because I can just always turn to them if I just need a good read. Okay, the next one is a book everyone else loved, but you didn't. So it's the only one I don't recommend, I suppose. So I don't have a copy of it, but I'm going to say mostly anything by Brandon Sanderson. I don't understand why people like Brandon Sanderson. He's not for me. I guess I'm specifically going to call out Way of Kings because everybody loves the Stormlight Archive, the first book being The Way of Kings. I tried so hard. I read 750 pages. It was 1,000 pages. Something like that. Basically I read 75% of this book and I had to DNF it. I literally DNF'd this book that everybody loves because I expected Game of Thrones level stuff and it was so boring. It was so boring. I did hear someone say that, he extremely plots out his books in advance. And maybe that's what I don't like. I think Game of Thrones, because I actually asked, funny story, real quick, side story. I asked both Anne Rice and George R. R. Martin when I went to book signings the same question. I asked them, do you guys kind of plan out everything or, before you start writing it? Or do you just kind of write it and wing it and see what happens and just have a general idea? George R. R. Martin said, his quote was, he told me, I plant the seed and let it grow. So he just kind of wings it a little bit. Obviously he has it planned out, but not probably to a T, chapter by chapter, exactly what's going to happen. Anne Rice basically said the same thing. And I actually told her what George R. R. Martin said, which was kind of funny. So she knows the general direction she said it's going, but not what's going to happen exactly in every scene. I feel like Brandon Sanderson maybe plans it to a T. That's what I heard somebody else say. And maybe that's why I don't like it as much. I also feel like his writing is very cut and dry, and I clearly like more the flowery writing of Anne Rice, and I did not care for it. I don't know. So I'm going to say most things by Brandon Sanderson I do not enjoy. A book you read the fastest. Obviously novellas I read really fast, but I think I read most of this book in one day because I could not stop reading it, and it was Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This is one of my all-time favorite books. Gave it 5 stars. I've only read it once, but boy, I cannot wait to reread it. Characters have superpowers if they have near-death experiences, so they try to gain superpowers by killing themselves almost, and the 2 main characters are mortal enemies. They're both kind of bad guys, and it turns into an X-Men type situation too because there's a lot of different sort of villainous characters or superheroes or whatever, and there are just crazy events. The timeline was nuts. It went back and forth to the past, the present, and different characters' points of views, and I loved all the side characters, and I devoured this book. The sequel took me a lot longer, Vengeful, but Vicious, read it so fast. Oh, and I have to throw another book in there. I'm so sorry. I've got to have 2 books. I totally forgot that I read this in basically a day. Slate House, I recommend it all the time. Starts out as like horror, haunted house, ghost story kind of thing, turns into sci-fi. It's amazing. It's very, very short. You can read it in like one sitting, even if you wanted to, but absolutely phenomenal. Next is a book that deserves more hype. I am going to say, I just have to find my copy. Oh, here it is. I never ever hear anyone talk about this book. The only person ever mentioning this book was Kayla from Books and Lala, which is where I heard about it. Never once have I heard anyone else mention it, and that is, oh, my copy's already getting a little worn. Anyway, A God in the Shed by J.F. Dubois. And sadly, the sequel was not as good. There's eventually supposed to be a 3rd one. I didn't even buy the sequel, but I gave this book 5 stars, and it's horror. I've never given a horror book 5 stars. Probably never will again. But I absolutely love this book because it has some of my favorite things ever, which is like there's a detective who's trying to piece things together. There's a supernatural element. There's different characters kind of doing different things. And there's obviously a little bit of like fantasy. And I don't know, but it's set in the real world, which I clearly like, kind of urban fantasy type stories that are set in the real world. I'm not as much into like high fantasy. So highly recommend, even if you're not into horror. Absolutely loved it. Number 6 is a book that's becoming a TV show or a movie. Don't really know, don't really keep up with that kind of stuff very much. So I'm just gonna say the only one I know is gonna apparently be a movie relatively soon. It was supposed to be a long time ago, but I think COVID like put it off or something, but is The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp. I read this a couple years ago. It's young adult. I recommend it to all my students in the library because it's very like fast-paced thriller. It's literally about a girl who was raised by a con artist. Her mom was a con artist, and she knows all these skills now herself, and she's really good at being like a criminal basically. But at the very beginning, she finds herself in the middle of a bank heist, a bank robbery, and she has to use all of her like criminal knowledge to outwit the criminals, which is really cool, like criminals versus other criminals. But a lot of it's her backstory, and there's flashbacks to things that happened in her past and stuff. But I hear that Millie Bobby Brown is going to be the main character in this, like the girl from Stranger Things that plays Eleven. So maybe one day it'll eventually come out. Okay, next is a book you've reread the most. There's no question. Well, Harry Potter, obviously, I've reread that the most. I would like finish it, as soon as one of the books would come out, I'd read it, and then I'd immediately start it again. So that doesn't count though, because I've already said it. So I'm going to definitely say The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. I have reread these probably at least 4 times each, except for the newest 2, which, where are they? Battlegrounds and Peace Talks. I'm almost going to pretend like those don't exist. Like, I didn't like those at all. I thought they kind of, went off the rails, let's say. But the first 15 books in the series, this one's the first one, Stormfront. These are also kind of my guilty pleasure series, I suppose. But before I joined BookTube and started reading a lot of other books, I would reread this series over and over and over. So yeah, I've read these at least probably 4 times each. Oh, and they are urban fantasy too. I think they're like kind of the urban fantasy series. I'm sure everybody's heard of them, but that's clearly my style. Next is a book from a genre you don't typically read from. I don't usually read just a lot of straightforward like mysteries or thrillers or anything like that, but one that I absolutely loved and gave 4.5 stars, and I cannot wait to read more from this author, is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, because I really do like a twist on haunted house stories. Clearly I liked Slate House, but this one was another kind of twist on haunted house story, but it had dual timelines, which is what I really loved. Like the dad from the past and what happened like when the main character was a little girl and lived in this scary kind of possibly haunted house. And I can't remember now, he either wrote a book or did like a documentary or something about their house they lived in, and it flashes to him. And then it goes back to her point of view in the present when she comes back to the house to see like if it was really haunted and like confront her past. And it was so cool. And I love the way the ending wrapped up, because you really don't know if it's going to be a haunted house or not, all the way until pretty much the very end. And I really liked that. And I just thought it was so intense, and I cannot wait to read more from Riley Sager. Next is a book that deserves all the hype it gets. Well, there's only one thing I can really say for that, and that is the Game of Thrones series. Obviously the series is super hyped. It is literally a TV show. Now we won't talk about the ending of the TV show because it was very bad. I think this one's signed too. I got this one and the 5th book signed when I met George R. R. Martin, because the 5th book had just come out like 13 years ago, whatever it was when I first met him. But anyway, so yep, I would say this series is definitely worth it. I absolutely loved it. Even if you've seen the TV show, I think the books are better. I mean, the TV show is great, at least the first like 5 seasons. I started rereading them. I've only actually read them 1 time each. The first 2 I did reread, and I just started, look at that. I was on page 24 of the book 3. I would like to read them again one day, but I think I just discovered BookTube, and therefore I had too many other books to read that I was finding, so I didn't get a chance to reread the rest of them. Number 10 is a book you usually recommend when asked to give a recommendation. And I'm gonna think about like my school library specifically. Students ask me for book recommendations all the time. And if they want something like fast-paced, a lot of them like a little fantasy element, but maybe not a huge one. A lot of them really like thrillers, mysteries, things like that. A lot of them like friendship dynamics and stuff. So I always recommend, I bet you guys can almost guess what I'm gonna pick, right? Neverworld Awake by Marisha Pessl. I talked about this book ad nauseum recently, so I just don't think I should tell you everything about it. But yes, there's a time loop, which is another one of my favorite things. They're stuck in this time loop thingy until they decide which one of them is going to live, and the rest of them are all going to die because they were in this car accident, and everybody has a secret. There's something going on with everybody, but also the main character's boyfriend from the past, like from high school. Oh, and it's after high school, which I like. They're out of high school now, so I like that setting instead of just always set in high school. But her previous boyfriend died relatively mysteriously, so they realize they're going to have to kind of solve his disappearance during this little time loop excursion. But there's so much that goes on. They have to do crazy things. They have to at one point learn how to be like robbers and use guns. And it's just like they just, they have ample time. They have all the time they need basically. But I absolutely love this book. It's so fast paced. There's reveal after reveal after reveal, almost to the point that it's too many reveals in a short amount of time. But for young adults especially if they have a short attention span, this book would be great. Next is a book that has your favorite character. Well, I'm sorry, I'm repeating this time because obviously Harry Potter books have some of my favorite characters. Sirius and Dumbledore are my favorites. But the Dresden Files have a lot of my favorite characters. Honestly, Harry Dresden is my favorite. I absolutely love him. His voice is hilarious in the books. But I have to say my favorite literary character of all time is none other. And I don't have the first book in the series here on hand because it's upstairs. But anyway, Lestat. Lestat. I know it's not pronounced that. It's like Lestat or whatever. I still call him Lestat because I've done that since I started reading these books when I was 14 years old. I've read these books since I was 14 and I absolutely love them. They're my favorite. Obviously, Anne Rice is my favorite author. Lestat is definitely the best literary character of all time. He doesn't care about anything. He does what he wants. In fact, in book 3, he becomes a rock star, a vampire rock star in the modern day world. I feel like he's almost based on like a Dorian Gray or like an Oscar Wilde type character. So he's very flamboyant, but he's absolutely amazing. And I recommend the Vampire Chronicles to pretty much everybody, unless you don't like the more flowery writing. Next is a book you wish you could live in. So I had trouble figuring this out, like what world I'd want to live in. I'm not going to repeat any of the same answers. Obviously, I'd say Harry Potter, clearly. But I wanted one set in a different world. But I don't read too much high fantasy set in a different world, but I would have to say, and I don't really recommend the second 2 books in the series. I honestly pretend like they don't exist, but I absolutely loved the first book, A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. She's also the author of Vicious, but this book has 4 different versions of London. So there's Grey London, which is like our London. There's no magic. There's Red London, which is where most of the story takes place, and it's basically like there's tons of magic is flourishing. There's White London, where there was magic, but then something happened, and now no one has magic, but the people, some people really want it. They want to have power. They'll do anything to get it. And then there's Black London, which destroyed itself by magic, and nobody can go there anymore. So clearly there's going to be some stuff going on with all these different Londons. There are some people, very few people, including, of course, the main character, who can travel between the different Londons. And so I just loved that premise. Like, I loved it so much. And so I'm gonna say, especially Red London, but I would love to be able to travel between the 4 different ones. I love that world. I thought it was a really, really unique idea. This is a very short read, but if you read it, I'd honestly stop here. The rest of the series, not that good. Okay, next is a book you thought you would hate but end up loving. I feel like I talk about this book all the time too. I talk about all these all the time, but it would be I Hunt Killers by Barry Lyga. I thought I would hate it because it was young adult. The title sounded honestly kind of just silly. I was like, I hunt killers. Okay, that's ridiculous. Whatever, he hunts killers. Okay, you can't come up with anything better than that. And just the cover, I was like, okay, it's just like a kid whose dad's a serial killer, and now he has to help track him down or track down another serial killer who's like doing copycat kills because his dad's actually in prison. And I just thought that's like, why would the FBI or CIA or whoever it is, why would they need help from like this kid? This just seems ridiculous. It's young adult. It's not going to be very intense. I was totally wrong. This is one of my favorite young adult books. In fact, it might be. I don't know. It's up there. It's one of my favorite young adult books. No, Neverwell Awake. I don't know. It's a competition between the two. It's up there as one of my favorites. It's definitely my favorite like thriller book of all time, including adult thrillers, because it is very intense. When your dad's a serial killer and took you along to his killings, yeah, it's going to be pretty intense. The main character has quite a bit of internal conflict because he's afraid that he's going to turn into his dad. And then he also has to deal with like school and girl troubles, but also helping the police to find this copycat killer before anybody else dies. Okay, we have 2 questions left. Number 14 is a book that made you cry. I think only one book ever has made me shed a tear, and that was the 6th Harry Potter book. But we've already done Harry Potter, so we're not going to talk about that. And it was not when Dumbledore dies. Spoiler alert, I'm sure everybody knows this. But it's not when Dumbledore dies. It was actually when Dumbledore, they were coming back from that cave, and maybe it was kind of foreshadowing Dumbledore was going to die a little bit, but they were coming back from that cave where Harry had to get the Horcrux out of the bowl thing, and Dumbledore says like, I'm not worried, I'm not scared or whatever, because I'm with you, Harry. And at the beginning he says, don't worry because you're with me. Now he says, I'm not worried because I'm with you. And oh my gosh, cried, shed tears over that moment. I get goosebumps. Oh my gosh, seriously, I have goosebumps just thinking about it. That's crazy. Can you see this? Look at that. The hairs on my arm are standing up. But because I don't want to repeat my answers, we're going to say a book that at least made me feel emotions that I didn't expect it to give me, and that is The Hotel Nantucket by Ellen Hildebrand. I did not think I would enjoy anything that was like realistic fiction or romance at all, but this one was so much fun. It was more about like the hotel itself. But obviously a lot about all the different people in the hotel and just the way that it ended. I love the ending. It made me so happy. It just made me like feel so good. And I highly recommend this book. There's also, now it's not really a huge element, but there is a tiny supernatural element. It's like, is the hotel haunted? There is a ghost, and there kind of is. There's like this ghost that like watches over people. So anyway, I loved it. Highly recommend. And finally, a book you wish you could reread for the first time. Well, it's another book I gave 5 stars that I've not yet recommended to you in this video, but I talk about it all the time. It is The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. Why Scott Hawkins hasn't written anything else, oh my gosh, is beyond me. I would read anything this man wrote if it was like this book, but yeah, he hasn't written anything else. This book is wild. Honestly, it was the fact that I did not know what was going to happen next that made me want to keep going. Like, you have absolutely no clue. At one point there's like talking lions and you're like, what? Like, there's just stuff coming out of the blue. And it does go back and forth to different characters' points of view, which of course I like. It's set in the real world sort of, and then goes to like this other place where this library is. The main character, her dad might be God. We don't know. She spent her whole life like in this infinite library, which of course I'm a librarian, so I love. Then you've got Steve, who's like this ordinary guy. He's doing a pretty good job just to, being ordinary, until Carolyn, the main girl, shows up with a tempting offer, a pair of red rubber galoshes and exactly $327,000. And then he's swept up into this like battle for the control of the library and the future of the universe itself. It says, brilliantly plotted, yes, blackly funny, truly epic in scope. That is so true. There's a cast of characters that includes a tutu-clad psychopath, a malevolent iceberg, I don't even remember that part, I'll have to reread this, and a lion named after an atomic bomb. This is the year's most ambitious and acclaimed fantasy debut, and a ride like none you've ever been on before. So there are, it's got some, it says gruesome consequences, like it's a little scary, not really even scary, but it's a little funny, it's a little ridiculous, it's definitely kind of fantasy. I absolutely love this book. I cannot recommend it highly enough, but 5 stars. If I could read this again, I will read it again, but to read it for the first time and have no idea what was going to happen, oh, that would be amazing. So guys, those are some of my recommendations. Hopefully you found something you might want to read, but I pretty much gave all those books 4.5 or 5 stars, except for a couple. So good luck on your reading journey. Thank you guys so much for watching. And hey, if you have any recommendations for me, if you also liked one of these books and think I would like something else, please let me know. I'm always looking for new books. So thank you guys, and I will talk to you guys again later. Bye.